Welcome everyone to our special webinar this week, going beyond RMiT compliance to win the fight against ransomware, brought to you by SentinelOne and Blackpanda, supported by the TEG Group. So welcome, it's great to be here. I'm Liz Drysdale, I'm your host today, and with me I have Jean Yu, CEO and co-founder of Blackpanda. Hi, Jane.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
And also with me, I have Kelvin Wee, Director for Security Engineering at SentinelOne. Hi, Kelvin.
Hi, Liz. Hi, everyone.
Great. It's going to be a great session for you today. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So bear with me. So I'm going to share my screen now. And I hope you guys can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, perfect. So we have a great agenda for you today. We're going to talk about dwell time. We're going to talk about RMiT compromise assessment requirements, and then we're going to go straight to real life case study of a hidden malware that hit an FSI here in Asia Pacific, but then we used top level service and AI technology to block the ransomware attack and remediate within weeks. And that is going to be Gene's session. He's going to take you through that amazing story throughout the whole story. And then after that, Kelvin Wee will be conducting a technology demonstration, actually how the technology, AI-driven technology, was used in that particular case to block, well, to remediate the attackers and contain the attack, okay? And after that, we have the Q&A. So don't be shy, we really want this session to be interactive. Even though your mics are mute, please send us your questions and comments in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we'll try to cover all of your questions at the end of the session. And also, if you would like a copy of this recording or the slide deck that Jean is going to be sharing, please let us know in the chat box and say, yes, please, I want the copy of these slides and recording. All right. So before I pass on my mic to Jean, let's go for our first poll question. Okay. So Boone, let's launch the poll. So the question is, has your organization performed a compromise assessment? Has your organization performed a compromise assessment? Yes, frequently. Yes, but not recently enough, or no? So let's check out. I'll give you guys a few more minutes. Jean, what do you think the answer will be? What do you think the majority will be here?
I was expecting actually yes, but not recently enough. There's a lot of, I'm seeing it come in, a lot of yes frequently, which will be interesting. You know, I think it would be interesting, Liz, if we ask this question again at the end of the session, because I wonder if the audience is answering on what we think is a compromise assessment, which is interesting, right?
Very good point. So. Very good point. All right, and we have 30 more seconds in. Kelvin, what do you think about the poll results so far?
Yeah, it is an interesting mix. Of course, I think the ones I'm very concerned are the ones who have not done any compromise assessment at all.
Exactly. All right, and I think we have our answer of the poll. Let me just end the poll now and share results. Can you see the results there? So we have 54% says that they conduct the compromise assessment frequently. Yes, but not recently. There was 23% and no 23%. So that's very interesting results, but very good point, Jean. Let's see if what they say compromise assessment, what they understand compromise assessment is what compromise assessment, or the difference between one or the other, right? And on that, I'll pass on the mic to you, Jean, to take us through.
Thank you, Liz. Next slide, please. So as introduced, my name is Jean. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Blackpanda. We're a cybersecurity firm that specializes only in incident response and digital forensics in the Asia region. So one of the things leading into what Liz was just talking about with compromise assessments, the reason why we've come around together today is because RMiT has pushed out a notification around guidelines for cybersecurity prevention and proactive defense measures, where stated and quoted directly in this guideline in clause 11.10 that a large financial institution must undertake independent, meaning a third-party firm, to come in on compromise assessments on the technology infrastructure of its critical systems at least annually. Okay, so what's missing out of this snippet is around compromise assessments. There are requirements for vulnerability assessment pen tests, okay, or penetration tests, which is called a VAPT. So this compromise assessment is referring to the cybersecurity industry terminology that's defined of what a compromise assessment is, which is different from a VAPT, again, vulnerability assessment penetration test. What are the differences? Next slide, please. Okay, so there's a lot of text on this slide, so we'll take it a bit slow to let everybody digest all of this, but I'm going to start on the right-hand side talking about the picture here of the 7 layers of cybersecurity, okay? So there are 7 layers traditionally in cybersecurity defense thought. It starts with the human layer on your outer perimeter, then your perimeter security level, the network itself. Then we get into the endpoint, which is your workstation, your computer, or your servers. You have the applications on the actual computers themselves, and then you have the data security around your mission critical data, okay? As incident responders, Blackpanda responds to ransomware, business email compromise, any type of breach on a daily basis to our clients and inbound new cases as well. And I would tell you that over 90% of attacks that we see are coming through phishing-led or human error. Okay, so what are phishing-led attacks? Kelvin will get into more of the technical details of this a bit later, but essentially it is a extremely well-crafted Zoom invite or O365 user credential revalidation, message or Google Suite, et cetera, tricking you into thinking that that is actually coming from those companies, but is actually a hacker's ploy to get you to give up your user credentials, your password, or just clicking on a link and then deploying the malware right inside the endpoint from the get-go. So taking that context, if the majority of attacks are coming through this type of essentially a swindle or a scam, right? They're not coming through these 7 layers of cybersecurity defense. Okay, it's not the mindset here of a hacker very skilled breaking through gaps from the human layer into perimeter to network to endpoint to application data to get to the mission critical data. Okay, what's happening in those cases is your users or your employees from the endpoint level are accidentally clicking on links, okay, and allowing the attackers directly into the endpoint. It's like giving the keys to the front door to the bad guys, and they're going right through all those layers and getting into the endpoint. Okay, so there's different mindsets here in terms of the type of audit or the type of kind of due diligence on yourself that you would do. So a penetration test, which is very important, and we're very big proponents of this as well, it fundamentally answers the question, can you be breached? So it is an outside-in approach to understanding your security defense, and this is why the arrows are going at perimeter, network, and endpoint. What a penetration test is doing is a white hat hacker that you hire comes in and looks for gaps in each of these layers, okay, and then punches through them to demonstrate that you do actually have a gap and vulnerability here, and you need to patch up your walls, right? If you can look at these around your mission critical data, these 7 layers of walls, right? And so what they're doing, the pen test is doing, is it's answering a theoretical question of where an attacker could get inside your system in your enterprise, in theory, right? And sharing with you your gaps and vulnerabilities so that you can patch these up. The major gap that a pen test isn't covering, and again, not only just what we see, which is around 91% currently of attacks through phishing-led or human error social engineering attacks, the data out there globally is that actually it's above 95%. So if you think about that, that is the pen test is covering actually a small piece of the most likely type of attack that you're actually facing, which is the phishing-led attack. So the phishing-led attack can be checked or thwarted through a compromise assessment, because a compromise assessment answers the question, have you actually already been breached? It's not a theoretical question, it's looking at the reality of your inside of your endpoints, whether or not you have malware already in there, which as I keep on stating and repeating, because it's so important, the majority is that the majority of attacks are coming through phishing-led attacks, where people are clicking on these links and they're coming into the endpoint. So it's a compromise assessment is an inside-out approach to understanding your real-time security status. It answers the question if you're already breached or not. Okay. Now, this is also very important because in today's COVID environment, most companies are operating in a work from home or hybrid office model, meaning that when you're at home, for example, which you can see I'm at home right now, I don't have much of a network and perimeter security as though I'm sitting in the office. I'm just an endpoint sitting in my apartment here in San Francisco. And that is essentially my entire cybersecurity world is this endpoint level. Okay, so again, this is why a look at the endpoint risk level is so important in combination with your penetration test. And that's what the RMiT compromise assessment is talking about, is doing this service here. So this is again why we were tying earlier, because in Asia, we see that compromise assessments are not as prolific as penetration tests. It is a very common service in the States, et cetera, but not so much in Asia. So that's why I was a little bit surprised about the answers. So be interested to see the answers a little bit later. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next thing that principle that I'd like to talk about is dwell time and how compromise assessments relate to that. Okay, so dwell time is defined as the length of time a cyber attacker is undetected and has free reign in an environment. Essentially, it is the amount of time that it takes for a victim to realize they've been penetrated and been actively breached and are, have offensive operations basically being conducted against them. Obviously, the longer the dwell time, the worse, right, type of situation. Next slide, please. So currently, according to M-Trends, in the Americas, the average dwell time is around 60 days. In EMEA region, it's about 54 days. And then in Asia Pacific, we're a little bit slower in terms of the maturity of cybersecurity awareness, education, et cetera. We're at about 94 days. I would tell you that most of the breaches that we respond to are well above 90 days in terms of dwell time. Okay, so I find this stat a little bit misleading, okay, but it is officially what we've been able to find research-wise. Part of the reason why Asia doesn't have as accurate data around this is because there's very few countries right now. Singapore is leading with certain sectors for mandatory breach notification. So there isn't a lot of forthcoming data coming out of Asia companies. So to be honest, I question this number because most of dwell time I see is well over 120 to 150 days, okay? 10% of the cases, as you can see from the data, 10% of Asian companies that are reporting they've been hacked, they actually have dwell times of excess of 3 years, okay? This is a little bit more giving you the picture of where we're at as a region and community when it comes to cybersecurity and our awareness with dwell time. Well, how do you defeat dwell time? How do you reduce the amount of time that you detect an active intrusion and catch the attack earlier rather than letting it manifest in such a full form in terms of harming you? I think it's very important to remember as well is that when you think about the type of attackers that we're generally facing and you have to worry about, it's not the militaries and organizations out of nation states. That's what catches the headlines of North Korean sponsored attacks or out of Russia, et cetera. If you have the Russian military targeting your company, there is very little any private sector company can do. Just like if the Russian physical military was physically targeting you, what do you want a private security company to do for you, right? Now, the good news is that's not the real threat group you need to worry about. The most likely course of action and threat group you need to worry about, and that we see in private sector, are cyber financial criminal groups, right? They're coming in looking to steal money from you. That's your primary threat group. And when you think about it and put that bad guy hat on as though that's your business, because they do run exactly as businesses, it's their goal to come into your system and stay as long as possible undetected and steal from you over a long time horizon. Just like your businesses, you want recurring revenue, so do they. And they want to hold on to their clients for a long period of time and steal from you in a recurring fashion, right? And so it's not in their interest to highlight to you that they're in your systems. It is their goal to be in this 10% of cases, to be with you for over 3 years stealing from you, okay? So again, now the pressing question is, we have this problem with dwell time being so long. How do we curtail the dwell time to shorten the losses that you're taking, and maybe even unbeknownst to you? Next slide. Okay, so basically the answer is compromise assessments and threat hunting. Okay, so, and this is of course the premise of our entire discussion today, and how Blackpanda and SentinelOne provide quite a superior compromise assessment that we've been deploying across the Asia region very successfully across numerous financial institutions. Next slide, please. So for our compromise assessments, we talk about how Blackpanda and SentinelOne work together. So Blackpanda, like I said, is a specialist cybersecurity firm that only does digital forensics and incident response. SentinelOne, as a global leading endpoint detection response AI solution, is one of the main tools that we're using to run the compromise assessment, and why we work so closely hand in hand. We chose SentinelOne out of all the major players because we knew it had the best storyline, and it was the best use case in terms of scaling and scaling our capability in this particular space. Okay, so in terms of the first stage, if you don't have an EDR, endpoint detection response AI platform installed, that's the first thing that we do. And so, if you got breached and called Blackpanda and you didn't have an EDR AI solution in place, the first thing we're going to do is try to install the EDR AI, because it does so much of the manual work for us as forensics, as cyber firefighters. It just automates so much of the hard work that we would have to do manually, that it's the first thing that we want to deploy. But not only that, as well, is that the AI engine behind SentinelOne is able to detect behavioral anomalies, which again speeds up the detection and response capability for us on the response side. Also on the Blackpanda side, we will deploy our own forensics tool called Panda Recon. Okay, Panda Recon is looking at the logs, okay, the forensic logs. It essentially is covering things that SentinelOne is not looking at as an endpoint detection response solution, which largely revolves around active processes. Panda Recon looks at essentially dormant things, right? And in that sense, Panda Recon and Blackpanda are looking for earlier stage attacks, meaning they're still in reconnaissance phase. Okay, the attackers have gotten into your endpoints. Maybe they've brought some of the tools and the malware that are going to detonate, but haven't deployed them yet, for example, and they're just running around doing a reconnaissance. Okay, the reconnaissance is a very important phase and could take weeks if the attackers are taking their time. And this is something that in the onboarding phase of the compromise assessment with Panda Recon, Blackpanda would come in and ideally detect these and stop them even at an earlier stage. At the same time, SentinelOne is normalizing inside of your network and learning all the behavioral anomalies and bringing up all sorts of all the things that they're seeing as well for us to mitigate. Once we're through that piece, and there's usually a tremendous amount of true positives and sort of things that SentinelOne is able to detect as such a superior, sophisticated product, we move into the second phase, which is called active threat hunting. Blackpanda level 3 threat hunting specialist or incident response specialist, we've created our own 120 plus advanced threat hunting queries that are based off of our knowledge as high-level hackers as well, and deploying these type of methodologies and thinking the way that that hackers would be coming into the system, particularly with the new type of attacks we're seeing, whether it be with SolarWinds or Colonial. We add all of those into these threat hunting queries and then manually go through and analyze the logs as well. So that's kind of the second phase. Then you can see on the back end, on the third phase, what we'll do is we use a platform called Dark Owl, very powerful search engine for the dark web, to sweep the net to see whether or not we can confirm stolen credentials, leaked data, or even cyber criminal chatter indicating that you've been compromised and leaked. Hackers are very chatty and sharing of their successful exploits. And these are sort of things that we're going in to corroborate with the forensics findings to see what, to give you a holistic picture. This is what we, along with SentinelOne, consider to be a holistic compromise assessment. Again, inside out look and making sure it's seeing real time are you penetrated and breached right now? Okay. Now that is maybe this time I think Liz might have another polling question.
Yeah, actually, it's not polling question yet, but it's a very interesting point that you made, Jane. So this sounds an amazing process, very comprehensive. And I did not know the difference between pen testing and compromise assessment. So thank you for clarifying that. Now, globally, so you shared with us that it was surprising the results from the poll question on how many people are actually conducting compromise assessments. But here in Asia Pacific, you haven't seen many FSIs conducting this comprehensive compromise assessments, correct? You were surprised. What about globally and best practices? What should the FSIs or the people here watching us on the call today, what they should be aiming for in terms of benchmarking against the best in the world?
Yeah, great question, Liz. So, global banks, like for example, JP Morgan and Citibank, have very large global follow the sun 24/7 teams like Blackpanda internally that are running these type of compromise assessments on a daily basis. If you remember our conversation about dwell time, essentially players at that size and at the global level have literally zero risk tolerance for any dwell time at all. Okay, they need to know immediately. So it comes down to what I like to describe. It's a business decision. I think everybody would like to know immediately if there's any active intrusion breach in the level of a compromise assessment, but it becomes a cost issue of whether or not you can afford and it was worth your risk appetite to conduct these on this frequency level. In Southeast Asia, together with SentinelOne, some of our banking clients have us coming in on a weekly basis. Okay. It's very difficult, sorry, as a quick segue, it is difficult to build this internal capability because it is a high level skill for the response or the specialist to come in and conduct this type of compromise assessment. So unfortunately, we're still at a stage in Asia where it's still growing, and that's why there's firms like us that can be still contracted out for much less cost rather than building this internally at this stage. So our banking clients across the region generally are on a weekly schedule, whether it be internal or their ATMs, which we'll get into in a little bit. And then also, for example, our hedge fund clients and larger cryptocurrency type of financial institution clients, insurance clients, et cetera, more on the monthly or biweekly pace. And then we recommend for SMEs who are on the cost-conscious side at a bare minimum, at least do a compromise assessment quarterly, because like what we described earlier, the dwell time, let's say that number at 94, we want to be inside of that OODA loop or that decision cycle before you get surprised by an active intrusion, right? Which is bad. That's bad for you. It's reached generally its final form before you would see it. We want to get there earlier and disrupt it before it gets into its final manifestation, so to speak. So yeah, so it comes down to, Liz, it's a great question. I think it comes down to a business decision on each part of the clients and to be worked with, of how much risk tolerance you want to take. Right.
But it's interesting, before moving on to, but I'm very, very curious to hear about the case study, but before moving on, it's interesting that the RMiT guidelines, they only mention annually. Would you get a little bit concerned that a few BFSIs in Malaysia are following the guidelines without being aware that annually is just not good enough? They have to do it way more frequently than that. I mean, when you mentioned the Citibank benchmark, they do it daily. So from a daily to annually, that's a big gap, isn't it?
Right. I think it is a big gap. And I think that, I think that one aspect is that right now, I do see in Asia that the compromise assessment is viewed very similarly to the VAPT, which is why we were describing that earlier about the differences, right? A VAPT, generally speaking, should be conducted on the frequency basis of how often you're changing your actual cybersecurity infrastructure posture. Usually companies are not frequently changing this all the time. And that's why an annual VAVT is a general decent pace, because you're not changing, the castle walls, so to speak, right? It's infrastructure. But the compromise assessment, as I just described, is generally conducted on a much more frequent basis, because you just never know when somebody in your company is going to click on one of these phishing links and let somebody right into your environment, right? And so that's why the frequency of these becomes more relevant. So I would contest RMIT's advice along those lines. Our clients currently, we commonly disrupt early stage attacks during our compromise assessments that we're running on a more frequent basis. We find them in there and are disrupting early stage attacks. And so, the proof of the pudding for me on that, and I'll stand by that, because we actually see it real time constantly with our clients. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. So now that's a great segue for you to tell us about the real case study of one of your clients, right? Let me just go through the next slide. There you go. Can you see it?
Yep. So, okay, to share a case study here. So one of our banking clients, top 3 bank in one of the Southeast Asian countries, had a major ATM fraud case ongoing, right? And could not figure it out. Typically speaking, was very, very experienced on the physical security side of ATMs and how to prevent skimming and all sorts of, I learned all sorts of advanced techniques that people steal from ATMs, in syndicates and whatnot. And it was very puzzling here, because with the EMV, the chip technology on our new credit cards and debit cards, this is very difficult to do any type of skimming. And this is one of the reasons why technology has moved to that direction. So from our perspective, when we came in to help investigate this case, the first thing we looked at on the ATMs was whether or not there was any cybersecurity defenses and whether or not a compromise assessment had been done. Because at the end of the day, the ATM is a endpoint. It is a computer, right? It is running an operating system. There's nothing really different about that. Now, depending on how the ATMs are set up, we commonly hear sometimes, how can we be hacked? We're air gapped, or we're not connected to the internet, etc. Well, there's software updates, right? Which malware can be introduced. There's USBs can be stuck in. There's many different ways actually that these type of closed off environments can still be penetrated by cybersecurity attack, right? Cybersecurity attack, well, and as I always like to say in every single webinar, make sure I say, is that cybersecurity is not an IT problem. It's a security problem, right? It's not a computer that's attacking you. It's a human being. The human being is not limited to just purely behind the keyboard to come after you, right? There's many different ways that they'll be able to get into your systems, because that human being is very intelligent, most dangerous animal that ever existed on Earth, right? So that is your adversary here. The findings, the first thing we saw is, like I was saying, in compromise assessments, the first thing we always do is deploy SentinelOne, because SentinelOne is such a powerful platform. The AI engine will just rip through and find so many of the things and save us so much of the work. In the cases where we're not allowed to deploy something like SentinelOne and we have to do it manually, it's very expensive for the client. We can do it, but it's very manual. And to be honest, we may miss things in a manual aspect where it's automated through the SentinelOne platform. What we saw on the ATMs was, number one, was that there were multiple unauthorized removable media. So everything that I just said in terms of it being a controlled environment. Look, there were I think there was 500 ATMs, right, in this initial compromise assessment. That's a lot of ATMs to be physically controlling, and over a time horizon of, I think it was like 5 to 7 years, that they hadn't really been checked because they thought it was just not online. That's a lot of time period for just one breach, one security gap to occur that could own all the ATMs and eventually result in this, where the bank was losing a lot of money from ATM fraud. Okay, and so again, it comes down to, can you really trust that all of your security in place is theoretically protecting you, and you don't need to audit at all ever just to see whether or not anything got through? I don't think it's a very wise risk decision. Okay, so I believe in due diligence, right? Trust but verify. Anyway, so the serving technicians were not properly monitored when we came in, because we did look at the physical side as well. They were subcontracted with little due diligence, based off relationships from owner to owner, but no real process in place of checking the technicians and seeing their backgrounds and, whether or not they were trustworthy individuals. Also, the guards who were subcontracted weren't looking for any type of cyber type of approach of attack on the ATMs, purely on physical, whether or not people were trying to steal cash. So they didn't know what to look for as well. Okay, so these are the gaps on the physical side. The ATMs themselves had little to no anti-malware software. If anything, there was some very legacy, basic signature-based antivirus, which is kind of like an antiquated version of what EDR and like SentinelOne can cover these days, and just unable to detect any suspicious or malicious behavior. So as soon as we deployed SentinelOne immediately across the 500 ATMs, SentinelOne identified and picked up a command and control malware embedded under a very legitimate ATM process that could not have been detected without SentinelOne and the combination of the forensics analysts looking and seeing the results and knowing that that was funny, right? And we went and investigated that. Definitely traditional antivirus was glossing over this and missing it every single time. Could not even blacklist it by name, so we had to do it manually. But now also SentinelOne was able to take that information, add it into its database of behavior-based indicators, and we actually ended up even discovering 13 other variations of this malware in the ATM that did lead back to how the attackers were stealing all this money out of the ATMs. Okay, so it's an interesting use case that we wanted to highlight. Compromise assessments for the financial institutions out there listening aren't just your internal network and enterprise. Your ATMs are endpoints as well and can be exploited, right? And so just want to highlight that across the spectrum of where compromise assessments can lie. It is cyber due diligence. Okay, it's a cyber audit, for your enterprise. Okay. All right. Back
That's
to you.
amazing. That's amazing, Gene. Did you say that there were 13 variations of that malware?
Yeah, sorry.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's different variants and whatnot across different ATMs as it had mutated and taken on different forms. So it had been in there for so long. I mean, we didn't investigate the deep background of it. We mostly were focused on injecting it, closing off, how the security gap and vulnerability, how they got in, and now securing the ATMs for that bank going forward, right? And running. And now, of course, we run weekly compromise assessments on these ATMs for them.
Perfect, because that was going to be my next question. How often are you conducting compromise assessments for this client, right? To prevent our next wave. So it's weekly. That's good. So earlier, Gene, you mentioned that the average dwell time is 94 days, but you're questioning if that data is actually accurate, right? Just out of curiosity, what was the dwell time in this use case, in this case study?
I'd have to apologize. I have to dig that up. It was over a year though, for sure.
Over a year. Wow.
Yeah. Maybe even longer. That's why I don't want to speak. I actually think it's much longer in my memory, but yeah.
Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, this is a common thing that we see in our compromise assessments. I would say that well over 50% of clients that would come in and there hasn't been an EDR tool like SentinelOne deployed, we find true positive malware at least 50% of the time. Like they are breached, right? There's an active attack issue and ongoing that needs to be remediated. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's great. And an interesting point that you made about the legacy antivirus that this company was using that couldn't detect and didn't even know what was happening. So they missed that. And that, I believe, it's our segue for Kelvin's part, right, Gene? So I'm going to stop sharing now because Kelvin is going to take us through how the SentinelOne console, SentinelOne platform helped the team at Blackpanda do the assessment and block and remediate the attack. Go for it, Kelvin.
Thanks, Liz. All right, can you guys see my screen? Hear me all right?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, perfect. So just to set the stage for the technology demonstration, I just like to highlight that I'm running virtual machines on my laptop here. And I do have two virtual machines that is running to demonstrate what actually happened in that particular case study that we talked about, the one that we've got engaged together with Blackpanda. So the environment I have is basically a staging zone where I can access malware. I have a whole repository of different kind of malicious codes and so on. I can use different tools to do mutation and so on, right? So this is where I would prepare the payload. And what I'm going to do next is to launch the attack from this machine to a device that's protected by SentinelOne. In other words, a device that's in a protected zone. This is how our customers would set up the environment and so on. So just to recap on what Jean mentioned around the case study that we've got, the example was definitely there were a lot of the compromise actually happened on the end user side, the user credentials part and all that. But I think the key component that actually happened was from the code itself, the hackers were able to manipulate certain files, created a 0-day malicious code or malicious attack. And that was the one that bypassed the signature-based type or the traditional based type of solution. It went into a USB and then it got the ATMs infected and so on. And that's where you get 13 different variants that Jean mentioned about. Now, obviously, when you have SentinelOne in place, then SentinelOne will be able to protect those machines, or whether it's an ATM or your devices or any IT devices, anyone with the IP address. So this is where we are able to provide that level of protection in that particular environment. So the SentinelOne agent was being used as for the compromise assessment and of course the subsequent protection of those devices as well. All right, so now into the demo itself. So what I'm going to highlight is that the environment that I have, this particular staging environment is not protected by any security products, right? That's the reason why I'm able to see and manipulate and use all these different tools for the malware and so on. Now, part of my job actually requires me to analyze and look at different sets of malwares, right? So this particular folder that I have here has a repository of close to 70 different malware that we see today. Now, one of the things that I would highlight is that I am handling live malware. These are not, these are the ones that are found in the wild. As a malware analyst, if you are trying to verify whether a particular payload is malicious or not, you can always verify this through a reputation website. And one of the things that you can always do is that you can look at the signature of these files, right? I can copy the signature of these files and I can go to a reputation website like VirusTotal, for example, and then search for the reputation of this file. Now, what you will notice is that this has about like 38 out of 68 vendors who have confirmed that this is a malicious code. So not too many, I mean, more than 50%. But if you go into the level of detection, then this would be the various vendors who have identified this as a malicious code, and they would have a signature database to protect you against this kind of attacks. So 38 out of 68 is not really promising, but if you see any of these vendors with a green tick, then it means that they will not have a protection mechanism against this particular payload. So I have about 70 of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this this demonstration a little bit more challenging. We're not talking about 1 or 13 variant. I'm going to use 70 new variants in this particular attack. Now, how am I going to do this? Knowing that about 38 vendors are able to pick up this particular ransomware or this particular malicious code, there are different techniques that I can use to do what we call mutation or manipulation. So I'm going to create a new folder called mutated. I'm going to copy all these 70 files. And I'm going to paste them here. So you have to trust me on this. These 70 executables are all malicious. If I were to verify them through VirusTotal one by one, you will see that there is a specific reputation for this. So one of the techniques or one of the tools that is currently available today is that you could actually take the executable code and do several kinds of mutation, or what we call packing. Now, to pack 80 files, 70 files is actually very tedious because I have to do that one by one. So I'm just going to run a routine that will allow me to basically do a for loop. I'm doing this very carefully because I don't want to make a mistake as I'm dealing with live malware at the moment. And the tool that I'm using is this thing called mpress, which is a metacode compressor. And what it does is that it takes an executable, repackage it, right? Think of it like wrapping a Christmas present. So I've got a present, I've got this payload, I'm wrapping it with wrapping paper, I'm changing the code, but at the same time, I'm doing a compression of that. Now, this is a very old school kind of tool. If you look at when it was created, it was back in 2007 to 2012, where this particular tool was being used. I think you can still search this on the internet, but I would say search with caution, because I don't think this tool is available from the source itself. There might be some other GitHub or some other sites that provide those tools, but you need to verify them because some of them might be malicious in nature. So what I'm going to do next is that, because this actually takes a very quick process to take the 70 files, compress it, and effectively when the compression is done, think about it, there will be a new signature, there will be a new identity to this particular code. Now, if you're using a signature-based or traditional AV type of solution, what this happens is that the AV vendor may not be able to see this new signature and may not be aware that there is now a new variant of this particular code. So when that happens, it is not in their signature database and they will not be able to detect that. Now, how SentinelOne is different is that because we leverage on machine learning and AI to develop mathematical models to identify the malicious code, even though it has been mutated. So think of it like an X-ray machine. We're able to see the sequence and what they're trying to do. And that's how we're able to identify that and take the automated quarantine action. And in a compromise assessment situation, this SentinelOne agent is being used to sweep across the entire network, all the devices, to make sure that there are no dormant malware that's residing there. So as I'm going this, letting this run in the background, I just wanted to highlight that, when we look at the particular malicious code itself, you see that the date timestamp has changed. And if I were to look at the signature or the properties of this file, this particular one, it has definitely got a new identity. I'm just copying the signature, going back to VirusTotal. And what will be interesting to see here now is that if I were to paste this new signature, remember 38 vendors found this to be malicious in the past. This simple mutation technique that I've just activated has now made this into a 0-day, and you see that there are no matches found. So just imagine the time that you need to take if you have to do a manual mutation. I'm just running a script here that will just take less than a couple of minutes, because a couple of seconds for 70 files, that is the kind of payload that we're looking at. Okay. So now the entire mutation process is completed. You can see my prompt over here. What I'm going to do next is that I'm going to move to the environment that is running with the SentinelOne agent. I'm trying to mimic an ATM machine here, is because I'm running this on a Windows 7 machine with very low resources. Typically, what we do see in a lot of ATM environments is that they are running on like a 1-core CPU with 2 gigs of RAM, or in some cases, you might have a 2-core CPU. So you will notice here in my environment, I've only dedicated a 1-core CPU with 2 gigs of RAM running Windows 7. I do have a target folder where I'm going to copy the files across. So going into this environment, remember I'm doing a network connection through to my staging environment. If I were to copy these 70 files now across into the target machine, you will see that SentinelOne detects this in machine speed. Typically, we take about 100 milliseconds to do a verification about how malicious the code is, right? You will see that the CPU will spike up because that's where we quickly detect that. and all 70 files have been quarantined within a matter of seconds. And that's how effective we are, and that's how we are able to protect our customers against these kind of zero-day. I've mutated those live for you on the spot, and you can see that those are brand new, zero-day, never been seen before, and that's how we are able to protect our customers against this. So going to just a very quick summary on that, from the management console, if I were to look at all the various incidents, you'll see all the detection in place. You'll be able to see all the different malicious code, and then the insights, right? I mean, remember I was telling you about the X-ray machine capability. Literally what we're looking at is all the different anomalies of the code itself. We are able to identify that based on threat indicators, and you can see that I've automatically quarantined those files. All right, I've come to the end of my demonstration, and that's the case study that we have together with Blackpanda. Jean, any additional comments on that?
No, I thought it was a fantastic presentation. It really shows, if anything, I want to emphasize how amazing EDR and SentinelOne's platform is that it can detect those mutations, it can detect those 0 days, and how insufficient antiviruses, which is, I would say, the predominance of folk that we run into in the Asian market, just have an antivirus. And that's sufficient, right?
That's very, very important comment, Jane. That's amazing, amazing tech demo and live hack, Kelvin. Amazing. It's just incredible how easy. There was one of our guests suggested that maybe next time we could also try and test the variants on hybrid analysis. Absolutely. As well as virus total. So there you go. Thank you, Lawrence, for your suggestion. We'll take on the next time, right? Right now we have short time to go through our questions. We have several questions, guys, coming through, which is awesome. Keep them coming. But before we answer your questions, we have a surprise for everyone here on this call. Ahead of the yearly deadline that we all have, right, with the RMiT deadline in November to conduct your compromise assessments, we are giving away special discounts for the first 3 clients that lock in a compromise assessment with Blackpanda. So special discounts, amazing discounts that Blackpanda and SentinelOne are giving to you. But you have to lock in your compromise assessment by October 30, okay? So in order to capture that, and we only 3 lucky clients will get that, the first one, so you have to jump in. So let's go for our second poll before answering the questions. Boone, time for the second poll. Actually, yeah, boom, time for the second poll. Awesome. So please, everyone on the call, let us know if you would like Blackpanda and SentinelOne to contact you to discuss the compromise assessment and activate your special discount. So let us know, yes, please, and then we'll get in touch with you straight away. While our guests are answering the poll, guys, let's start answering their questions. How about that? Cool. So I think we're going to start with Madeline Chung's question. She has a very, very interesting question. Jean, maybe that's for you. Compromise assessments versus threat hunting. What's the difference?
Yeah, so clearly threat hunting is a major component of the compromise assessment, particularly with the SentinelOne platform. We add the component of using the forensics approach through other techniques, tactics, and procedures, as well as Panda Recon. Because for us, a complete compromise assessment also needs to look at the logs and see whether we can detect things that are dormant processes, right? I want to try to catch things in the compromise assessment in the reconnaissance phase. Briefly, my background as a former American Special Forces officer and a combat veteran, reconnaissance to me is a basic security function. It is one of the most important and lengthy parts of an attack. Okay, it is 2/3 of the actual attack in a planning process is a reconnaissance. And if I can disrupt that process right there on the defensive side, that's gold. Okay, it is very, very challenging to execute in a successful attack without a proper reconnaissance. So that's one aspect of our compromise assessments beyond threat hunting, as well as the holistic dark web sweep that we'll do to look for evidence of compromised information already that's out there, or chatter, et cetera, et cetera. So to the answer to the question, yes, threat hunting is a central component of it with SentinelOne in that phase 2, and it's also for us a phase 1 and a phase 3 earlier stage and the aftermath that we're looking for as well in the compromise assessment.
Oh, I see. That's an interesting point. That's an interesting point, Madeline. I hope you got that cleared as much as I did, because it was very clear answer. Thank you, Jane. I think there's a segue from Stephen Gann. He asked, does it need to be an agent-based for the assessment?
So like I was just explaining, at least the way we do our compromise assessments, we like focusing on the endpoint, right? And that kind of leads to, I think, Devinder's questions here as well. Actually, on the slides, we're focused on the endpoint level. We've decided to focus on that because we look, one aspect, by the way, as part of the Blackpanda group is heavily involved in cyber insurance underwriting. And so the data that we're collecting, so to speak, from the forensic side is focused on the endpoint because real financial damage occurs once the attackers get inside the endpoint and control the mission critical data. The primary two attacks that we see that enact real financial damage, like existential crisis, catastrophic loss, financial damage, is ransomware and business email compromise. Okay, and in order to do these, you got to get into the endpoint. So I'm a very Pareto principle strategist. I'm always looking for the 20% that are getting the 80% out. And for me, the 20%, that 20% 80 rule is at the endpoint level. And that's why we're focused on agents, because they're inside the endpoint. I'm less concerned from the underwriting perspective and the financial damage perspective of an attacker getting through your perimeter or network level and just running around and not able to get into the endpoints. Okay, that is a less of a concern to me about financial damage. And that's why we're just focused on the endpoints. We want to own that holistically, come in the compromise assessment, your last line of defense, right, before mission critical data, and looking there and clearing out the attacks, right? That's your last line of defense, okay, is the endpoint.
That's fantastic. That's really, really good point, Jean. Thank you so much. I think the next question is for Kelvin. Kelvin, Stephen asked, what are the key differentiators of SentinelOne with other players?
Okay, so that's a good question. If you think about the technology that's being inbuilt within the agent itself, there are a couple of patterns that we have filed, right? So there are pattern designs, they are unique to us. What I've demonstrated today was only one of the many engines that we've got in our agent. So the static AI engine allows us to do the analysis of executable files and so on. We do have other capabilities like the behavioral AI engine, as well as our one-click remediation and rollback capabilities. Definitely, Stephen, if you are interested in that, we can have a separate demonstration on those capabilities. Anyone attending this call, we can show you the full suite of the capabilities of the SentinelOne agent. That is what Blackpanda has been leveraging on as well, not just on the compromise assessment threat hunting piece, but also in cases where there are some very advanced APT kind of attacks. The remediation or the repair of those devices could be done automatically or through remote means.
Perfect. Thank you. Fantastic. Fantastic, Kelvin. And yes, Stephen, if you want us, let us know, drop us a note, and we'll definitely conduct a full sweep of our platform, right, Kelvin?
Absolutely.
Now, we have another question here, Jean, I think is for you, from Sarah. Are the compromise assessments only useful for ATMs? I think you covered that, Jean, but let's clarify that again, right? Are compromise assessments only useful for ATMs, or can they be used in other environments as well?
Yeah, so again, since our compromise assessments are focused at the endpoint level, an endpoint, which is and I agree, by the way, it's a bit of a confusing engineering term, but it's basically your workstation, your PC, your servers. These are where we're focused. So ATMs, we've highlighted that use case because it's an interesting one for our banking clients and audience, if they've ever thought about the cybersecurity protection they need on their ATMs, because those are endpoints as well, since they're computers, right? So that's really, yeah, I'm sorry that was confusing, but compromise assessments are actually much more widely used in normal network and enterprise and just your general setup. So, and again, I just want to emphasize for companies that are operating a work from home and hybrid environment, how important it is to focus. And I would say that, again, to the comment, I think it's a great comment from Devinder about overkill. I do want to overkill the endpoints, right? This is the most important last layer of defense at this point. And this is where we see all the attacks and financial damage occurring. So again, Pareto principle, let's focus 80% of our value into 20% and really do it well, right?
That's a great point. It's better be safe than sorry, right, Jane? It's the old one.
And to add to what Jean has mentioned, you know, we see a lot of organizations now working from home because of the pandemic. So even the layers of security that has been built for the infrastructure does not apply anymore because the endpoint becomes the first line of defense. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Great point. It's no longer the last line of defense. It's actually your first as well. So that's, again, why it's so important, the endpoint. It's you really are living and dying by the endpoint these days in the COVID world.
Yeah, especially now. It's not overkill, it's guaranteeing, right? Exactly. We've just got one last question. Actually, we have two last questions. I'm going to try to squeeze in. Lemon asked the RMiT for FSI compromise assessment required ATM to be part of the scope of work. Lemon, apologies. Lemon, I believe that, well, here we are consultants. But it's better for you to go back to RMiT to confirm that question. From our understanding, everything in your organization needs to be part of the compromise assessment. Everything, right, Jean? That's the compliance regulation is not only one section of your IT and IT organization or infrastructure, it's the whole stack, correct? Correct, Jane?
Yeah, that's my interpretation. Also, I would just also highlight from the case study about the actual security of your ATMs and the value of actually conducting the compromise assessment outside of any RMiT compliance kind of requirements, right? So our recommendation is that if you're a bank and have ATMs, for sure you should check those, okay, because of the use case we've already highlighted. So that would be my.
Perfect. So one last comment, and we're almost over time. But Jean and Kelvin, one last to wrap up today's session, which was amazing. In addition to compromise assessment, we understand that compromise assessment is just one key factor of your security strategy or your cyber resilience framework. Jean, let's start with you. In your experience and your opinion, what other strategies should financial services or BFSIs consider to improve their security posture?
Oh gosh, well, this is such a wide question. Sorry to deflect because it's such a broad question about overall cybersecurity, right? We could talk for a very, very long time about this. I think at least for the context of our conversation here, maybe it's important to highlight that the solution we're presenting around compromise assessment is not an end-all be-all A to Z cybersecurity solution. We're talking about a very specific service, its purpose, its use case, and how it's tied back to this RMiT guidance and requirement for financial institutions in Malaysia. It's a specific tiny slice of cybersecurity that is being highlighted by the government as critical. And we're here in this webinar to help educate a bit about what it actually means and why you should comply with it and why you should actually care about the specific piece right here. So sorry, I'm not going to tackle on everything you need.
Maybe that's the topic for our next catch up. How about that? Our next webinar. All right, Kelvin, from your standpoint, what would be the best strategies to improve the security posture, but to also enable these financial services and everyone here on the call to improve their operational efficiency?
Yeah, I think I echo the same sentiments as Jean. It is a very broad question to answer, but just to reemphasize on a few things, right? The technology is only one piece of the puzzle, right? You choose the best tool that will suit your environment from a SentinelOne perspective, the platform is very flexible, is open, it can be integrated to other investments that you have already made. But to Jean's point, the compromise assessment, the way I see it, is like a hygiene thing that you have to do. It's something that you cannot do once and forget. You don't brush your teeth once and that's it. It's a continual thing that you need to do to make sure that you upkeep your security posture. Now, the main thing that I also like to highlight is that Blackpanda has been a very good partner. They have been very exposed. Their threat intel gets the latest kind of threats that we see in the landscape. Those are evolving. You need to evolve in the same pace, or if not, you have to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of them. Protection is key, but the hygiene piece is very important. And how do you actually keep up to the kind of threats and attacks that's happening out there? I think that's very key.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. Thank you so much, Jean. Jean, for joining us today all the way from America and taking us through the amazing case study and answering these very tricky questions. Thank you, Kelvin, for the fantastic live hack. And everyone was flabbergasted. Whatever we could share everyone was with their jaws dropped, just like mine. Everyone on the call, thank you for attending today's session, and thank you for your questions. I hope we answered all your questions. But once again, if you want us to share the slides and the recording, please drop us a note on the chat box and we'll do so. And if you also want us to participate and get those special discounts for the compromise assessment with Blackpanda, let us know. We will get in touch with you, and then you will be able to activate your special discount for the compromise assessment. But you have to do so before October 30. Well, that's in line with the RMiT deadline for November, right, guys? So have a great day. Thank you, Jean, once again.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for giving us your time.
Yeah. No worries. Thank you, Kelvin. And thank you, everyone on the call. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe and positive.